What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And today we're going to be talking about what the New York Giants can do to wrap up free agency and win the offseason. Of course, there are two elephants in the room that the Giants are waiting to solve: quarterback and right guard. How can they solve those two positions of need, and how will that set them up to hopefully have a much better 2025 season than the one that they had in 2024? Now, of course, we're still waiting on Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson and the whole saga there. Aaron Rodgers is reportedly waiting on the Minnesota Vikings to express any iota of interest in him. He's just holding out hope that the Vikings become interested. So far, they haven't expressed any interest, but he's hoping. And meanwhile, the New York Giants are waiting for that to unfold. And Russell Wilson ready to sign. So what are the New York Giants exactly waiting for? Well, we're not entirely sure, because Russell Wilson is a very capable quarterback who is willing to sign with them. But alas, we're going to go ahead and discuss how signing one of those two quarterbacks plus adding a right guard could win the offseason for the New York Giants. Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? How are you feeling with all this Aaron Rodgers news unfolding? Of course, he is also considering retirement, which I forgot to mention. As crazy as this all gets, it's just another day in Giants land, isn't it?
I'm doing well, man. This whole thing is just ridiculous at this point. I really don't know where the Giants go from here. To me, look, they should have signed Russell Wilson on Friday, because now they run the risk of not getting anyone at all, right? Cam Ward is likely going number one to the Tennessee Titans. That's what everyone's saying. So the Giants are going to have to make a decision whether they really like Sanders or Dart. But neither of those two guys are saving jobs in 2025. That's the truth, Anthony. Neither of those two guys are going to save Joe Shea and Brian Daboll's ass, in my opinion. They need to get a veteran quarterback here, and they are running the risk, and they're playing roulette here, that they could end up getting nobody. You know, the second tier, Joe Flacco's of the world, Jameis Winston's of the world, they're not saving jobs, right? He's waiting for Aaron Rodgers because he believes that Rodgers gives them the best chance at winning football games this upcoming season. And I get it. Like, Rodgers can still sling the rock. He's still a vet. He's still very confident, but he's Rodgers. And you said this, he is unpredictable. You know, if it was like, all right, it's just money, it would be easy, but it's not just money for Aaron Rodgers. He wants to go to the Vikings, but the Vikings don't necessarily want him. They want to turn the page to JJ McCarthy. They want to go in this direction with their young quarterback and build around him, you know, having cost-efficient situation, but they don't want to spend big money on. They just let Sam Darnold go. Had a phenomenal season for them, and then they're going to turn around and go sign Rodgers for $35 million per season. It doesn't really make much sense logically. So he's waiting for the Vikings, and then they have the Steelers and Giants as the second-tier options, and this is where I get a little bit annoyed, is like, he would rather retire than play for us. So, like, that's kind of what the reports are suggesting now. He might consider retiring rather than playing for the Giants, which does not make me feel good about the outlook of this team and how quarterbacks, the most important position in the sport, view our situation. However, the Giants can win this offseason to a degree in their own context, their own relevancy, that they get the best quarterback available. They get Rodgers. Maybe some people think Russell Wilson's better, so whoever you guys prefer, they get one of those two guys, and they sign a starting right guard. And yeah, like, they are a significantly better team than they were last season on paper. Now we have to see them actually execute and the coaching to hold up and things to be disciplined for them to win football games in a really, really difficult NFC East and a difficult schedule. But, you know, how long do we wait around for Rodgers before Russell Wilson decides, yeah, I'm just going to go sign with the Browns? If Russell Wilson signs with the Browns and the Giants are waiting, you know, with their legs crossed, tail between their legs, and Rodgers decides to go elsewhere, retire, whatever, Joe Shane wrote his own death wish in that instance. You know, that's a possibility right now. Where, like, you just drop yourself in the casket already, because that's where you're headed. You know what I mean? Like, this is a situation where they are running a massive gamble. And the reason they're running this massive gamble, Anthony, is because they think that Rodgers can help save their asses long term. Help save their jobs. They don't necessarily believe that Russell Wilson can save them, but they do believe that Rodgers can. That's how I'm perceiving this. I don't know how you're thinking about it, but that's kind of how I'm sitting here. Like, if they're waiting for Rodgers at this rate and running this risk and playing this gamble, I just don't. It makes me think that they think Rodgers can save jobs, and that's really where my head's at right now, and it's a hell of a gamble from them.
All right, since you were telling me before we started recording that we need to be optimistic, I'll shed the optimistic opinion here, shed some light on this with optimism. And I'll say that it could potentially be that the New York Giants know Russell Wilson is willing to wait for them. That could be what's going on here. Maybe Russell Wilson said, hey, I'm picking you over the Cleveland Browns if this job is available for me. I want to be a New York Giant. So take your time, figure out what you got to figure out with Aaron Rodgers, and if it doesn't work out, I'll be here waiting. That's my optimistic take on this. It could be that Russell Wilson is fine waiting because he knows that he wants to be a New York Giant. Now, that's not necessarily a lock, and you're right, it is a gamble that the Giants are taking here by allowing Russell Wilson to have other suitors and forcing him to wait is seemingly how it looks from the outside looking in. But again, if Russell Wilson knows where he wants to be and where he wants to be is MetLife Stadium, then maybe he is fine waiting for the Aaron Rodgers saga to unfold. But Alex, I want to throw out a alternative solution to the quarterback position, and it's not going to be Joe Flacco because I don't really think that's a solution. But I want to throw out something that's a little bit outside of the box. And if you didn't see, the Atlanta Falcons held on to Kirk Cousins past a certain deadline where they had to pay him an additional $10 million or something crazy in guarantees. And there's now a theory going around the NFL that they could potentially just be waiting it out to see what happens with the Aaron Rodgers situation before trading him once all of these different pieces fall into place. Let's say that the Steelers don't get a quarterback, but the Giants get Rodgers. Or let's say that the Giants miss out on the quarterbacks and Rodgers goes to the Steelers, Vikings move on McCarthy, and Russ goes to the Cleveland Browns. Then, potentially, Giants, last man standing here without a quarterback, back against the wall, then the Falcons might actually reach out and say, okay, now we're willing to trade Kirk Cousins because we know that you're desperate enough to make a deal. That's kind of a theory going around the NFL. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that could be an option that opens up for the New York Giants? Let's say they miss out on Russ, they miss out on Rodgers, they don't like Flacco. Could they maybe take that compensatory number 99 overall third-round pick that they got and trade it to the Falcons and bring in Kirk Cousins? And if that did happen, how do you feel about it?
Kirk Cousins to me is tier 2 as well. He's on the same plane as Joe Flacco for me. You might as well just sign him for money because Kirk's arm is cooked. Like if you watched him last year, I know he was coming off the injury and stuff, but he's older. Like this isn't a situation where like he's 29, he's 28 years old, and he had a significant injury and he's bouncing back. And usually that year is kind of like that year after is a little bit difficult, and then they really come back into their own. He is an old guy now, and like he's an older quarterback, and he's not a mobile guy, so he is completely reliant on his intelligence and his IQ, his football IQ, and his anticipation. His arm was totally gone last year, noodle-esque. Like he couldn't make the throws, and he was in a dome, dude. Like he was in a freaking dome, and he couldn't make the throws. Windy MetLife in November, no shot. Kirk Cousins is leading this team. No shot. He's saving jobs. No way. No freaking way. Joe Flacco's a much better option because he can put velocity behind his throws at the very least, and they're both immobile. So, that's where I would go. I have no interest in Kirk Cousins. I think he is washed. I think he's cooked. I think the Falcons are literally just are holding him hostage because they have a vendetta against him. I don't think that the Giants have many options here. It's Rodgers or it's Russ or it's jobs are on the line. Like that's really how I view it right now. Drafting Sanders is not going to save their jobs. He's going to struggle as a rookie, like most rookies do. 99% of rookies struggle. So like the likelihood of him having a like insane season is very low. So let's speak truth. Long term, maybe he could get a lot better. Maybe he could be a good quarterback in the NFL, but he's not going to be able to save jobs as a rookie. Most likely, there's an off chance. At this point in time, do you feel as though the Giants have to go sign Russell Wilson, though? Do you think that now's the time you strike while the iron's hot, you get him, and you make sure that you walk away with one of these two guys? Because that's kind of how I feel at this point.
I said it on Friday. The Giants shouldn't even be waiting for Aaron Rodgers. They shouldn't have let Russell Wilson leave that building. My stance on this has been firm, clear. The Giants are playing a risky game. I do agree with you. I'm only playing devil's advocate here to try and attack this thing from all angles, but the New York Giants are just risky right now. Sign Russell Wilson. What's the difference? I mean, I don't really see personally, and I know a lot of fans might disagree, I don't see a huge gap in talent at this point in their respective careers between Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. In fact, I think they're on the same level, and if not, I might lean towards Russell Wilson. I think that Russell Wilson is arguably a better player by most metrics and statistics and analytics, if you want to go into that route. Now, I know that film is a big part of it, and watching the game and watching the All-22 is also one way that you can make those evaluations and decisions, and it needs to be factored in. but I still don't see that big of a talent gap there either. And I think when you consider the fact that one of them is 41 and the other one is 36, that also needs to factor in. Why are the Giants trying to get this older player who's removed from an Achilles tear in 2024, or 23? I just don't think that it really is a logical step for them. And in terms of the Giants, having jobs to save, and Joe Schoen and Brian Dable trying to save their jobs, I will say this, Alex, about Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart, whoever. If the Giants do sign a bridge quarterback and they win a couple of games, and then they eventually plug the rookie in down the stretch, and the rookie shows some promise, that promise could be enough to buy them another season. Do you not think that? I mean, I know what you were trying to say, like it's unlikely that a rookie steps in and does the Jaden Daniels thing, and I agree with you. That's highly unlikely. However, we have seen in the past that, regimes can be saved by some promising flashes down the stretch from a rookie quarterback. Do you think that the Giants in this regime, that is enough to save them, or do you think they really need to go all in and win a surplus of games a season in order to save jobs?
I mean, the truth is this. Look, if Sanders has a year where he starts slow and then eases into the year and gets better, I think that there's reasonable, justification that Joe Schoen could save himself with that type of performance. But with the way the Giants, schedule is kind of situated and the difficulties in the NFC East, I don't know how a rookie wins more than 5 games. And after spending big money on Javon Holland and Paulson Adebo and, all these big moves, to win 5 games, whether it's with a rookie or a veteran, it's not enough, Anthony. It's not enough. You know what I mean? Like, it's just simply not enough. Even if that young quarterback shows potential and shows upside, I still don't know if it's enough, because if you win 5 games, that means you're not scoring many points. That means you're one of the worst offenses in football, and you're probably giving up a good amount of points too. So, every year injuries happen, and the depth of this team is tested. The depth behind the starters is not entirely encouraging. I think that Cordell Flott's a solid depth piece at cornerback, so I'm not like, it's not the end of the world. At safety with Dane Belton, who's not a very good football player. On the defensive line, you got Chauncey Golston now as his fine rotational piece, but at DT, it's they signed a bunch of different guys to offer depth. I think they'll draft one too. So like they're starting to build out the roster. Like, I see the vision. I see where Joe Schoen's heading with this, but none of it matters if you don't have the right quarterback. Like, that's the truth. Right? If you don't have a quarterback that can help you win football games, which is, I get why they were going after Matthew Stafford. I just didn't think it was in the best interest long-term of this team. And they wouldn't have been able to make all these moves if they did pay Stafford $50 million per season for 2 years. It would have been a little bit of a different of a strategy. So, with that being said, I do think that right now the Giants, like, they're positioning themselves to say, who's the best chance at winning us enough games to convince John Mara that we deserve to stay. How many games is that to you? You know what I mean? Like, that's the question. How many games do the Giants have to win in your opinion, in this schedule, in this division? How many games do they have to win to say, okay, I can give Joe Schoen another year?
Well, see, that's exactly that's full circle right back to the question that I was trying to ask you, because that question depends on who the quarterback is. Because if it is a rookie, it's not as many games as if it's a veteran. If it's a veteran quarterback, I expect this team to be competitive and winning games. If Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback and they're making this big hoopla and trying to pursue these guys and making it a big deal and risking all of their, future on these veteran quarterbacks, then they better win 8 to 9, maybe even 10 games with one of these veterans. I know that's not even a realistic projection. I think this is a 6-win team, honestly. But if you're going to be going in for Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, yeah, you need to win probably at least 8 games. But if it's a rookie back there, Alex, 6 games is manageable. That's fine to me. If they just meet expectations. The problem is the Giants haven't met expectations the last 2 years. They've severely underwhelmed. They've gone far underneath where the expectations lied for them. So if they meet expectations with a rookie quarterback in the lineup, or even exceed them just marginally, I think that's enough to save jobs personally. And that's kind of where I was getting and why I was asking you, if you think that a rookie could save a job, not by, doing the Jaden Daniels thing, but by taking over down the stretch, showing some promise and some flashes. We saw a lot of promise from the rookie class this past year, and arguably that is why Joe Schoen kept his job, because Malik Neighbors was spectacular, because Tyrone Tracy looked great, Tyler Nubin looked good, and Drew Phillips looked great as well, and Theo Johnson was starting to show some flashes. In fact, they've the Giants themselves have mentioned Theo Johnson several times. They don't seem to think that tight end is a real priority. Me personally, I think that they probably should have signed the veteran tight end at some point by now, but they haven't because they feel like the flashes that Theo Johnson showed down the stretch were enough. So if a rookie quarterback shows those flashes next season down the stretch, I could totally see them keeping their jobs and continuing to build for one more year. And also keep in mind, when we're talking about the long-term outlook for Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, Alex, they have the 2025 season and 26 season under contract. So they can technically fire them at the end of the season, but they're firing them with 1 year left on the deal. If things are kind of just fine, if they meet expectations but don't, exceed them, they could potentially just play out those contracts going into 2026.
Yeah, it's not a bad thought, too, because you assume next year's draft class is going to be deeper at quarterback, and the Giants maybe have a chance. And here's kind of the situation that Shane finds himself in is it's tough. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes right now because the odds are stacked against him. But if he manages to pull off a 7-win season and show enough competency that the Giants aren't a complete embarrassment, he has to weigh, do I float my 2026 first round pick to trade up for Cam Ward now and just offer the Titans the farm to get the quarterback, or do I wait until 2026 and float my 2027 first round pick to move up? Because the Giants, if they win 7 games, are not picking in the top 10 most likely. They're probably in the 14, 15 range. And that puts them in kind of hell again. That puts them in a situation where they're not going to get one of the top guys. They're going to have to trade their 2027 first round pick to go up and get a rookie quarterback. That's what it's going to require for the Giants. Maybe a lot more than that, to be honest. So, they have to weigh, is it worth taking the gamble now, or is it worth taking the gamble next year when we might not even be here, depending on what happens with our record this season and how John Mara feels about things. So the team on paper looks better. The secondary looks significantly better on paper. The defensive line is still very, very solid with Burns and Dexter Lawrence, and I imagine they'll draft a DT as well. You still have Kayvon Thibodeau from their 2 seasons, and your offense. You have Neighbors, you have Slayton, Wandale, Theo. Your offensive line on paper looks better, but you don't have a quarterback, and that's kind of where we round out about it. They can win this if they get Rodgers and they get a right guard. I think I can sit here and say this team is going to be substantially better than what we've seen in recent seasons, and to me, that's a win. That's a winning offseason. But if and even Wilson in a right guard would still be significantly better than what we've seen. Well, people get confused. Russell Wilson is significantly better than Daniel Jones. Significantly better than Drew Lock, significantly better than Tommy DeVito. It is going to be a totally different caliber of quarterbacking. We are so down bad from what we've seen. We are so used to seeing absolute dog water at quarterback that we forget what competency looks like. That's what's happening right now. So Russell Wilson, yeah, maybe Rodgers is a little bit better. It's a little bit better fit for what Shane and Daboll want. But Russell Wilson is going to be a significant upgrade. And the truth of the matter is, they need to make sure they get one of those 2 guys, and they have a chance to get one of them right now. How long is Russell Wilson willing to wait until he feels like the Giants are just playing games again, like they were last year? Last year he came in, they met, and they were like, yeah, we're not giving you the starting job, we're giving it to Daniel freaking Jones, and not even gonna let you compete for it, right? We're giving it to him. It's his job. And then they waited, and with Drew Lock, and that's it's I don't know, it's a tough spot to be in.
To be fair, they said he could compete for it. He didn't want to compete. That was what it was.
Because Russell Wilson is significantly better than Daniel Jones, and he knows that. So it's why would I be competing for this?
That. I found it ridiculous at the time, but just to clarify, they did say he could compete for it.
Sure. That's fair. But either way, he's I don't need to be competing with Daniel Jones. Someone's going to sign me to start for them, and that's exactly what happened. So, I do think that if you're the Giants right now, and he went to the playoffs, and people just throw records in there that's the only stat. He didn't score this many points. He did this. He had Arthur Smith as his OC, guys, and George Pickens was just a disaster last year on the sideline and on the field. He was dropping passes.
Several games. People forget that Pickens missed 4 games down the stretch of that season, and he was playing through injuries when he was on the field. You can see a direct correlation, and actually shout out to Authentic on Twitter and YouTube. He posted some really good stats about Russell Wilson and how his deep balls per game, there was only a handful of games where he didn't have at least 3 20-plus yard passes downfield. Those games were all games that George Pickens was out of the lineup or playing injured. All of the rest of the games that George Pickens was on the field and healthy, Russell Wilson was throwing like 6 deep shots a game. So he was completely limited by the talent around him and by his offensive coordinator and Arthur Smith, who is just not a good offensive coordinator. And I think everybody knows that. So, and if you want to add even more fuel to that fire, there's plenty of reporting that you can find that Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith had a lot of tension between them. They were butting heads and they didn't like each other. And that created a lot of the problems for the Steelers offense this past season. So I have to imagine in a world where Brian Dable is willing to do whatever he can to save his job, he will have a good relationship with Russell Wilson because he needs to, and things will go fine and swimmingly. And also, if you're talking about deep shots and pushing the ball downfield, the Giants are really situated to be a vertical passing offense. Darius Slayton is a good deep threat. Jalen Hyatt, we haven't seen enough of him, but we know that he's got some wheels. And Malik Neighbors, we know, can be an absolute elite deep threat in this league if he has a quarterback who can throw the ball downfield. So I actually dream of watching Russell Wilson and that deep ball in this offense with Brian Dable, being aggressive, throwing the ball downfield, and connecting on those deep shots with Malik Neighbors. That is what I want to see. I know that Aaron Rodgers can still throw a deep ball as well. I know that Aaron Rodgers is still good at this or that, but again, I'm making it clear. I think Russell Wilson is a better fit for the New York Giants offense and what they want to do and the playmaker and personnel that they have. With these playmakers who can get vertical and stretch the field, give me Russell Wilson, throw that deep ball into the mix, and watch Malik Neighbors and this offense actually start to spark.
Yeah, and in addition to that, he can still move a little bit. You know what I mean? Rodgers is not moving. Like, he is not a mobile guy anymore, like with at his age. And not to say Russ is, but he can at least pick up some yards on the ground if he needs to, if there's an opening. So, is a little bit more mobility there for Russ. I don't really know what the Giants are doing right now, man. I mean, it's possible that Russ doesn't really know where he wants to go yet. I think that all the reports suggest that he's ready to sign. I don't know really what Shane is waiting for, because when it all comes down to it, Rodgers is a wild card, man. He's the Joker. Like, you cannot rely on him to make a sound decision at a reasonable timeline. Like, it's not, he will blow it all up the second he has a chance. Like, that's his MO. So if he is undecided right now and he is like talking about the Vikings and we're hearing all these rumors and narratives, we really don't. And to be fair, I don't even think Rodgers has spoken to anybody. Even Pat McAfee's not even responded to his texts and calls. So all these rumors and reports coming out, I don't even think they're all really true. I think Rodgers is dead silent, waiting, probably poking and feeling with just his agent, asking and making some calls to see what's up. But that's it. Like, a lot of it's taken off its own storyline. But I don't want to wait for him to come out of his ayahuasca trip to figure out what the hell's going on in his career in the next season or 2 years. Like, I don't want to be the guinea pig for his decision making. You know what I mean? Go get Russell Wilson, because he gives you a good chance to win games next season, and he fits your offense quite nicely. And that's just the reality right now. And you could sign him to a 2-year deal, and you could have an insurance policy for 2026 if need be. And even if Joe Shane does end up getting fired and you have Russell Wilson on a second year of that contract, another GM is going to walk in and say, all right, you know what? It's only 1 year. We're starting from scratch in terms of like our regime. He has 1 year left on his deal. We can still draft a quarterback, and it's a nice bridge concept, right? It's naturally ends up being a bridge concept if Russell Wilson is on the roster for an extra year, and he's still a good quarterback. So I don't see that as a bad idea, as a 2-year deal at whatever cost. And that might be what the Giants are weighing, is like, is Rodgers want 2 years, 2 years? Does Russ want this amount of time? There's a lot of moving parts here. But Russ has always wanted to be in New York, so I imagine he probably doesn't want to be a one-and-done player here. He probably wants a 2-year contract, and maybe Rodgers only wants 1-year deals. And that may be the holdup here, and the Giants may just want that stopgap.
I'm actually reading reports that Aaron Rodgers wants a 2-year deal, but he wants that second year to be fully guaranteed, which is part of the problem.
But that's tough.
That's only one rumor report, like you're saying. We don't know the truth of anything in this situation. But I'll say this to the length of these contracts. I would rather give a 36-year-old a 2-year deal than a 41-year-old. I think that's
Fair
obvious,
enough.
right? I think we should all agree with that. I mean, honestly, realistically, we're talking about a quarterback in Aaron Rodgers who's played into his 40s. Russell Wilson, everybody talks about him like he's super washed and he's terrible now. I don't think that's true. And I think that if he goes through the right situation and has a little bit of a turnaround, what's to say that he can't extend his career into his 40s? He's 36. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's been to 10 Pro Bowls. He's a Super Bowl champion. He is one of the most talented quarterbacks to ever play the game. He absolutely could have a second win to his career, in my opinion. So I would like to take the chance on Russell Wilson and hope that in the best case scenario, you sign him to a 2-year deal, he exceeds your expectations, maybe he does become a long-term solution for you. But we know that that's not possible for Aaron Rodgers because he's going to be 42 years old this season. So no matter what, you can't get that second wind out of his career. But Russell Wilson, at the worst, he bottoms out. You draft a rookie, you throw that guy into the fire, and you move on. But at the best, maybe Russell Wilson does get that second win to his career. And there is a little bit more longevity there than we seem to realize right now. Because again, we're talking about a guy in his 40s versus 36. Huge difference. I wouldn't discount the Russell Wilson second win.
Yeah, that would be an interesting second win for him. And listen, I think that the offense plays well because Arthur Smith is a freaking terrorist of an offensive coordinator. I think Dable's significantly better than him. So I do think that when you look at just offensive schemes alone, Russell Wilson is going to have more production. And Neighbors is amazing. Like, I'd say better than George Pickens. And Darius Slayton is going to have a nice rebound with a guy that can actually throw a deep ball on target. Right? Daniel Jones missed like 6 or 7 deep balls last year to Darius Slayton downfield that should have been walk-in touchdowns. Russ is not going to miss those, right? So like you can already add points to the board, add production to the board. I do think that Russ ends up becoming the quarterback here, and he's probably their best option at this point in time because waiting on Rodgers is just, it's not worth it. And even so, the consensus is that he'll go to the Steelers if he does decide to stay in the NFL anyway, or the Vikings don't want him. So, at the moment, the winning offseason means getting this one of those two quarterbacks, probably going to end up being Russ, so I still think it's going to be very solid for us, and signing a right guard, whether that be Tevin Jenkins or a stopgap veteran like a Shaq Mason. There are options there to upgrade, and I think that they should go get that quarterback and they should get that right guard, and that is a winning offseason to me because we are going to be competent, right? And at the very least, we'll be watchable, right, Anthony? There'll be people in the stands, not empty. There'll be people in the stands watching a competent football team, and that at least is a step in the right direction. Then we deal with the fact that we're probably going to be out of range to get a quarterback in 2026 anyway, so we're going to have to sell the farm to get one. That's a whole nother problem that we're going to face at some point in time, but we won't fast forward to that just yet. We'll try to win some football games and at least not be an embarrassment anymore.
Well, you know how I feel about that. I think the Giants need to be good before they can be great. I say that all the time. They need to become a competent football team, and when you're ready to plug a rookie quarterback in, if that's the case, then go ahead and do that then. Maybe they're ready now, maybe they're not, but if they want to go with Russ and they win some games this year, you sell the farm next year. That's how you do it. That's how the Chiefs did it. It's how the Bills did it. It's how the Ravens did it. It's how so many teams do it. So that's my take on that. But yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. We didn't talk too much about the right guard position in this episode, but I think we all know that solution is probably going to come through the third wave of free agency or through the NFL draft. The only thing I have to say about that, Alex, is I really hope that the Giants don't just reach for need at the guard spot because they know they need a starting right guard. So they just go ahead and take some random Josh Azidu level player in the third round when he doesn't belong there. I just don't want to see the Giants do that because there is a lot of talent in this draft class, and this is really one of those classes where you want to go BPA because if you do, you'll probably land quite a few starters naturally. You just might not get them at positions of necessary need, but when you start drafting for need, that's when you reach and you get absolute busts in the middle rounds of the draft. So that's really my plan for the right guard position. If it's the best player on the board, take him. If not, roll with the veterans that you have and hope that they're able to at least solidify something and bring a level of competency while you develop some other guys behind the scenes. But I do also think, Alex, if we want to touch on the right guard position real quick before we wrap up here, the way that the Giants are setting up this offensive line, signing James Hudson and Forsythe, whatever that guy's name is, the Seahawks tackle, they're pretty much just adding right tackles is what it seems like to me. And to me, that kind of foreshadows a move for Evan Neal to play right guard. I think that's what this is ultimately going to be, is a competition at right guard between Greg Van Roten and Evan Neal and whoever else they maybe sign or draft. But I do think the way that they focused on tackle in free agency rather than focusing on guard. We know that they had an interest in Will Fries. We know that they had an interest in Tevin Jenkins. And, maybe they still could make a move. Tevin Jenkins is technically still out there. They could sign a right guard. But the fact that they haven't yet and they've just added depth at right tackle tells me they might be planning on making this a competition at right guard in the worst case scenario that they can't land the right guard that they want. So what are your thoughts on that, before we wrap up? Do you think that there's a chance here that Evan Neal could be competing for the starting right guard job in training camp?
I think that they'll give him a chance. I don't think he'll win it. I think Greg Van Roten probably wins that job. this, and they re-signed Aaron Stinney as well. It's a bunch of backups, right? It's a bunch of backups competing for a starting job. That's not a good situation. The likelihood of one of those guys even panning out to be an average player next season is unlikely, right? Van Roten is 35 now, and they're bringing him back for another year, and he gave up 30 plus pressures last season. Like, he was healthy. That was about the best we got from him. Like, we got a lot of value from him just being on the field every week. But Evan Neal's never played guard in the NFL. He's still not practicing there. He's not going to make the transition in one summer, guys. Like, it's not reasonable to think that he's going to walk in and be a good guard. And we don't have the coaching to do. We're not the Eagles. We don't have a magic wand that can just turn offensive linemen into productive starters. He just, look, Mekhi Becton just went to the Chargers. 2-year, $20 million deal, right? $10 million per season. Not even the Chargers are fully convinced that he is a high caliber starting guard, right? Because even starting, Will Fries is not even, considered a proven talent. He got 17, almost 18 mil per season, right? So people looked at Mekhi Becton and said, he's a product of the Eagles being amazing at developing offensive linemen and having a great system and scheme. So we're not going to pay him like a top level guard. We're going to pay him like a John Runyon level guard. And that's before, that's after the salary cap just went up $20 million. So, I do feel as though the Giants are running a risky game. If they want to save jobs, that offensive line has to be like spotless to a degree and have plenty of depth. So I do think they should sign a right guard and sign Russell Wilson. If that means restructuring some contracts to do so, I think it's worthwhile to do it because they need to protect Russ or Rodgers or whoever they have there. And if it's a rookie, even more important to have a good right guard there as well.
Absolutely. And the last thing that I'll say on that, I think that signing one of these veteran quarterbacks will improve the offensive line because I think that both Rodgers and Russell Wilson have really good pocket presence and an ability to call plays at the line of scrimmage, make changes, and call protections as well on the offensive line, which is why I said a few episodes ago that I think John Michael Schmitz could have had the best season of his career by a long shot because I think a lot of the pressure that's been on his shoulders will be alleviated by a veteran quarterback, and I feel that way for the entirety of the offensive line. So really the number one thing that the Giants need to do to win the offseason or to be competitive next year, they just got to sign one of these two quarterbacks, and they can't sit around waiting for Rodgers and miss out on Russell Wilson. If that happens, the episode of Fireside Giants where I react to that is going to be violent. So stay tuned for that if that happens, but hopefully it doesn't because I really do want to see Russell Wilson playing for the New York Giants this season. But that pretty much wraps this one up. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you listen to Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
Perfect.